learning Spanish and wondering how long does it take to actually learn Spanish and become fluent? Don't worry, I got you. Let me show you. And by show you, I mean, let me show you a couple of examples of what does it look like a month in, or what can you talk about 3 months or 6 months or etc. into learning Spanish. And this can be very helpful because it helps you stay motivated and lets you know what to expect, more or less, and give you something to look forward to. And make sure you stick around to the end because I can give you some bonus tips on how to avoid the biggest mistakes that people make, including myself, used to, that make it so they end up spending way more time than I need to in expanding that timeline, and how to get through much faster and not just by studying for more. Hey, I'm Genevieve from Breakout and Speak, helping you break out and speak, because that's the fun part, right? So for many years, I was a Spanish teacher. And one of the coolest things was when somebody came in knowing zero Spanish, and then eventually we'd be having full-on conversations in Spanish. To me, it was so cool. And that's why I became a language teacher and now a language coach to help you speak a language, because it's cool and it's fun. So what does that process look like? So this timeline is based off of independent study. And let's say you spend 20 to 30 minutes a day learning Spanish, and life happens, so you take the weekends off. Not too bad, right? Sounds reasonable. Now, if you're in a class, this timeline will follow the timeline of the class. Now, there are a lot of things that you can do either way that'll help you learn way more and way faster if you stick around and subscribe, but that's up to you. Important to note, these examples that I'm about to share are not in any way making fun. No, actually, on the contrary, my intention is to show you're supposed to not speak perfectly from the beginning. That's normal. That means you're on the right track. I want you to see the different milestones along your way as you reach fluency, so you're proud of your progress as you go along. Okay, cool? So let's get into the examples. So what does it look like about a month in? Hola, soy Genevieve. Soy de Nueva York y me gusta bailar. So about a month in, you're not working with a lot, but wait a second, you started, good for you. And you're kind of getting used to what Spanish sounds like, and you learned a couple things and a couple phrases, and wait a second, you just introduced yourself. You just had your first conversation. Good for you. Let's see what happens after a couple more months. Yo tengo una hermana y un hermano. Mis hermanos son rubios. Yo, no. Ooh, you're on a roll learning more stuff, but wait a second, you probably won't feel like it, because at this point you'll probably still feel like a beginner and you're having a hard time saying what you want to say, but wait a second. Now you got some adjectives, you see how they change, you can use them to describe yourself and some friends and family, and starting to get the hang, at least starting, on how the bits and pieces come together. And let's see what happens a couple months forward. Mañana voy al parque con mis amigos. Mis amigos y yo jugamos fútbol mucho en el parque. All right, 3-4 months in, what are you up to now? Well, at this point, you're learning some more verbs, some more details about different topics that you can talk about. Now, you're probably keeping things to the present tense, but if you think about it, most of the things you talk about anyway in life, you're mostly talking about things in the present tense. So you're actually on a good track, and it's just a matter at this point of trying to put more of the pieces together. So what are you up to 6 months in? Actually, congratulations, you hit half a year. That's exciting. Let's see what you're up to. Ayer yo salí y yo corrí mucho. No, yo salí y yo comí mucho. Eso, sí. Y ahora tengo hambre. At this point, you're starting to talk about the past and things you did yesterday or last week. And oh, you can talk about the future too, and things you're going to do, which is exciting because now you can expand your time. And with the past tense, though, you're probably still feeling frustrated. You're going to meet some irregular verbs. They're not going to be your best friend, but actually, the more you do it, the smoother and the easier it becomes. So what was frustrating in the beginning of this phase gets way easier as you keep going forward. Shall we see? A year in, you made it to a year. Congratulations, you should celebrate. Actually, no, legit, like go celebrate. But you had your Spanish anniversary. So about a year in, what can you do? Personalmente, me encanta viajar. Es una oportunidad increíble para conocer otras personas. Y he ido a varios países y quiero ir a más. All right, you're in you. Look at you go, making full sentences, adding details, talking about your thoughts and opinions. All right, good for you. Because at this point, you actually know a good amount of stuff. Now, do you know all the stuff? No, not yet. But you can actually handle most topics about most common things. And that's a really big reason to celebrate. And at this point, it's now up to you. Do you want to continue improving, or are you happy with that progress so far? And you might think, okay, that's great, but how long till I'm fluent? Now, to answer that question, first of all, I have to ask, what does fluent mean to you? Because to me, imagine you're talking to a friend who speaks Spanish, and you're talking, they understand you, you understand them, you're communicating your ideas. That's fluent. To me, that means fluent. Now, that means you can handle most common topics about everyday things. And that's actually great news, because that means you can handle and talk about most things that you would need to in everyday conversation probably way sooner than you think. And to me, that's fluent. So congratulations. Now, the problem and what trips people up is that last little bit of trying to sound like a native speaker and not make a mistake. So if your question is, how long until that happens? Ooh, that's a tough question, but I'll try my best to answer. The answer to the question entirely has to do with how perfect are you trying to be. Now, expand your vocabulary, be able to talk about more topics, have it flow smoother. That's a great goal. Probably take you, depending on what you do, could take you about 6 months more, a year more. Your Spanish will be way more solid, you'll feel way better, you'll be able to talk about more things. And again, to me, that's a great goal to have. Now, if your question is, how long does it take to become like a native speaker and not make mistakes and know all the words that could possibly come up in any conversation you might have? No, that's actually really tricky to say, because you can continue learning things for as long as you want to, and actually there are always new things to learn. So that one depends. I would really encourage you, though, to be happy where you're at least a couple years into it, because trying to get to that last little bit of perfection, that's the thing that's going to hold you back. And the number one mistake that I see people make in this whole thing that makes it so they go through this timeline way slower is worrying about the part that they don't know and letting that get in the way of practicing what they do know along the stages of their journey. And I know it's hard in the beginning to try to speak when you feel like you don't know a lot and you're not even sure about the things you do 100%. It's tough. You do. You wish you're at the end and you knew all the stuff and it were easy. And you'll get there. But the problem, though, is if you think, okay, I'll use it in a conversation or I'll say it when I know more. The problem, it's a moving target, because you know more, you learn more, and then there's something else that you don't know yet. And the problem, and unfortunately I did this too for a long time and it held me back, was thinking that you will practice when you get to a higher level. So the problem with that is what happens is you start creating this gap between what you learn and on paper, maybe read and write, but then you still feel like you can't comfortably use it in a conversation. So my first bonus tip that's really, really important is embrace what you know every step of the way and practice it. Use it. You can say one sentence, use that sentence. Introduce yourself way in the beginning. You can talk about your friends and your family. Start practicing that. Try to include some more things. Don't wait till you get far down the line to start trying to use these things, because when they first come out in conversation, it'll be a little stumbly, might be a little bumbly, but that's how you get better, and that's how you can go through that timeline way faster, is actually if you are producing, using, speaking, practicing, talking to people. Even if it's imperfect, you gotta start speaking. Another important tip is connect to people who speak the language as soon as possible. Connecting to people is like rocket fuel for your motivation. You'll have somebody in mind, you'll actually want to communicate, it gives you motivation, it's better for your memory. There's all sorts of ways to integrate speaking that will really, really help push you forward and is the fun part. So try to include it as soon as you can. Another important tip and part of the equation is use quality language learning material that is the Goldilocks difficulty for you. What does that mean? Now, not all language learning material is created equally. If you are using something that's too easy for you, then that means you'll be spending time, but you won't be making very good progress. And if you do something that's too hard, then you can't really catch very much and you're going to get frustrated and possibly want to give up. Don't give up. Okay. The key is to find that Goldilocks level of difficulty type material that is just right, that you understand and can handle most of it, but it challenges you and still pushes you to grow a little bit. And very importantly, that you produce. Now, if you spend your time just understanding and listening or reading, then that's great, but that's what you're going to end up knowing how to do. And then get frustrated when you can't use what you know in a conversation. So if your goal is to speak, and if that's your goal, great. But that also means along the way, you have to practice speaking. I know, but that'll help you go faster. So what if your timeline doesn't exactly look like this timeline? First of all, don't feel bad. Everybody goes at their own pace, and it's probably because of one of two reasons. And one is maybe the calendar days have passed, but maybe you haven't spent enough time with the language itself. And actually, when I was learning another language, I didn't have 20 to 30 minutes to spend on it, but I did still make it to fluency, even with my 10-15 that I had at that time. So don't give up and don't let it discourage you if it's taking you a little bit longer to get to where you want to be. Now, number two, you might not be doing enough of those Goldilocks activities where you're slightly challenged but still can handle what you're doing and producing the language enough. And I know in the beginning, speaking a new language is tough. You don't have the words that you want to express what you want to say, and you get frustrated and it's a little stumbly, but you know, actually, if you stick with it, you'll be amazed at how quickly you progress. Because when you try to use the little bits that you do have, it forces you to remember, what do I know? How can I put it together? And okay, it's a little bumpy at the beginning. However, if you stick with it, it gets smoother and the words come to you faster and you start being able to say more and more. So the number one thing that you can do to get through that timeline faster is speak more. So I hope you found something useful. If you did, let me know. Give the video a thumbs up. Feel free to share with someone you know who's learning a language, and stick around. Subscribe for more tips on learning Spanish and other languages and how to make it easier, more fun, and how to get out in the world and speak, because that's the cool part, right? So out for now, but catch you soon. Oye, ¿quieres aprender español más rápido? Genial, pero eso tiene menos que ver con el tiempo que pase y más que ver con lo que tú hagas. Entonces, el secreto, bueno, uno de los secretos es intentar hablar en todas las fases, aún un poquito, aún imperfecto. Eso es como un atajo para llegar más rápido. Y si quieres, suscríbete para más consejos, cómo poder hablar español mucho más rápido y más. Entonces, hasta la próxima y chao.